Let's go and get started then. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the State Water Resources Control Board's Water Rights Fee Stakeholder Meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through the Zoom and the webcast platforms and also is being recorded. My name is David Ceccarelli, and I'm the Fee and Revenue Branch Chief within the Division of Administrative Services. Today, we have many of the Fee and Revenue Branch staff working behind the scenes to ensure that this meeting runs as smoothly as possible. If any time throughout this event you find that you're having technical difficulties, please email waterrightsfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Also assisting me today in this presentation is Cassandra White from the Fee and Revenue Branch. Joining us today is John Russell, Deputy Director of the Division of Administrative Services. In addition, joining us today is Eric Eckhall, the Deputy Director of the Division of Water Rights. And there's also staff within the division that'll be assisting with the presentation and fee change proposals that we will discuss a little bit later. Individuals attending via Zoom, please use the raise the hand function if you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment. If you are joining us through the webcast, you can also submit a comment or ask a question by emailing the email on the screen. Again, waterrightsfees@waterboards.ca.gov. In the past, there has been some slight delays in the broadcast through the webcast. Therefore, through the meeting, staff may pause so the broadcast can catch up to the listeners. Again, we thank you for you joining us today virtually. We thank you for your patience as we've moved into this 100% virtual meeting space. We are doing our best to ensure everyone can participate in an effective way. So let's just go over just a few meeting guidelines. Remember to use the handouts that were sent to you via email. If you do not have the handouts, don't worry. We'll be sharing the documents on the screen. You can also request the documents after the meeting, and the documents are posted on our fee webpage. When it's your time to speak, please introduce yourself and who you represent. And I may, those that speak first, I may again ask you to introduce yourself as we start the meeting here. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And remember, you can always submit comments and questions throughout the event, through the email. For the meeting to run efficiently and stay on track, we are requesting each participant who wants to ask a question to please ask one question at a time. I understand you may have a clarifying question to your original question, and that's acceptable. Once your question is fully answered, we're going to move on to the next participant's question, and you will be put back into the order of participants who are requesting to ask a question. In addition, we respect all opinions and input. However, if the discussion starts to move away from the intent of the meeting, which is to discuss water rights fees, then I'm going to ask that the participant and I meet offline to coordinate these discussions further and involve the appropriate staff as needed. So at this point, let's go ahead and review the agenda. First, we'll go over the water rights program budget for fiscal year 24-25. That's based on the governor's May revised budget. We'll go over the water rights fund condition. We'll discuss the water rights fund budget cost drivers. There's several BCPs that we'll have some discussion on. And then we have some fee change proposals we're going to discuss. We're basically item number 7. We'll just give a brief update on Sigma and kind of what's happened in the last few months with the adoption of the fee structure that revised fee structure that took place a few months ago, and then open discussion, and then next steps. So let's move to the item number 2, which is attachment 1. And I'll ask Cassandra. Cassandra, can you see this, or can this be made a little larger?
It can be made larger.
Okay, there we go. So I wanted to start with this chart here because at our March stakeholder meeting, there was a request to show the entire water rights budget. And because the water rights program itself isn't just funded by the Water Rights Fund, there are multiple funds that help support the water rights program. And so one of the requests that came in, we went ahead and pulled the numbers. This is, as John mentioned this morning at the water quality program, this is one program that does have general fund, and this general fund does support staff expenditures and state operations. So as you can see, this is the list of funds. So there's general fund, roughly about 43 million. There's the water rights fund, which is about 38 million. There's a small funding from the federal trust fund. Of course, there's the cannabis tax fund, about 3.7 million. And then there's what's known as the public resources account, the cigarette and tobacco products surtax fund, the tobacco tax, which based on the May revised budget, is looking at about $86 million to support all the activities within the water rights program. And before I move on, Eric, is there anything you want to add with the funding for the water rights program?
Not at this time. Well, actually, no, I take that back. That for this fiscal year, there is, I think, a fair amount of one-time funding that's still coming from previous budget years. So that general fund number is a little bit bumped up, I think, relative, as is our total, but that will go down in the off years when that kind of budget allocation runs out. That's all.
Okay. So we have a question. Steve, please go ahead and introduce yourself and who you represent.
Yeah, I'm Steve Haugen with Kings River Water Association, and I think I was the one that requested this table, and I really appreciate you guys bringing that forward. It will be helpful for some of my local interests to understand where we fit within the overall broader program. So thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. And just one thing to add to it. So when we talk about fees, the fees are supporting the water rights fund portion of this. So those are all fees supported there. Bob Gore, you have a question up. Bob, go ahead and introduce yourself and who you represent.
Hi, I'm Bob Gore from the Guelco Group, and I represent Kings River, Modesto Irrigation, Kern County Water, and several municipalities who buy water through water rights sellers. At any rate, to back up what Steve said, this chart is very useful and we appreciate it, but there's no context. It would help to have prior years, fund growth, PY growth, all the data that lets us have an intelligent conversation and contribute to cost management, which is much broader than fees, of course. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bob. So let's go ahead and move to the next item here, which is the water rights fund condition. And I'll go ahead and start with where we're at with the current year projections. And before we get started here, I want to mention that, and we've been talking about this in March and a little bit last year. Our accounting office is now caught up with the reports in the fiscal, which assist us on reporting on revenues and expenditures. And so when we look at when I'm going over the current year projections for fiscal year 23-24, I have expenditure reports where I'm able to start to determine kind of or evaluate where we think our projected expenditures are going to be. And of course, we do that with let's say 9 months of reports and prorating the next 3 months out for the total fiscal year. As we get into August, though, we'll be able to tie into really what our expenditures look like and have a better evaluation on the total revenues that are being collected. So when we look at the current year projections for 23-24, we had a beginning balance of $5.8 million. We are anticipated to collect roughly around 30.8 million in regulatory fees. And with other projections there were total revenue of roughly about $33 million. Our state operations expenditures, so our total expenditures are 35.7 million. Now of that, we're projecting that the state ops would be about 30.7 million. One thing I want to highlight is that the reason we break out, so there's a line item of $1 million of cost recovery expenditure authority for CEQA workload. And then there's also a BCP that was put in play in 17-18 for positions for Sigma, totaling roughly around $750,000. So in the governor's budget, that's all included into state operations, but we break it out on our fund condition because we're trying to be transparent on the fees themselves. And when we break down our structure here, we're costing both of them out, at least on the projection side of things. When you go back and you look at fiscal year 22-23, you'll see there was a slight expenditure of $29,000 and then revenue of $29,000. So there was some workload that had taken place. And then, of course, at this point, there's no charges to those Sigma positions, and then there's no revenue at this point for those Sigma positions. So that those two are zeroing itself out. So for 23-24, we're projecting to have total revenue about 33 million. And our expenditures are roughly around 35.7, which does result in a negative structure of 2.7 million. However, our ending balance in 22-23 was roughly around 5.8, which was roughly about 19%. So So this is starting to draw the fund back down and put us into more of an appropriate where the reserve should line up roughly around 9%. So ending balance about 3.1 million. So looking at, of course, the next line item column, which is no fee increases. Basically, what happens here is our expenditures for 24-25 are roughly going to be $38.8 million. However, again, without any increases in fees, we would have a structural deficit of around $4 million, which of course draws the reserve into the negative. And it's one of those key principles from the Department of Finance where, we can't have our can't have our funds into a negative reserve. And so moving forward, we are trying to collect revenue to generate roughly around 38.7 million. We'll talk about the cost drivers and kind of where that lines up. By doing that, we will be lining up our revenues and expenditures roughly around 38.8 million, which would result in an ending balance of roughly 3 million with a fund reserve about 8.1 million. Excuse me, apologies, with a fund reserve about 8.1%. Eric, you have your hand up?
Just a real quick addition, and we've talked about this before, but the Sigma fees they're in the water rights fund, but they are run through separate fee structures, and they are not part of the water rights fees that we charge to fee payers in the water rights system. Those are entirely separate. They just are part of the water rights account. And so we do have to, like David was describing, account for it as part of our total justification. But again, just to be very clear, water right fee payers are not paying for that and are not being charged fees for it, if that makes sense.
Yes. No, thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Are there any additional questions right now on the fund condition? Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next item here. Which is the budget cost drivers. There we go. One slide up there. There we go. There we go. Thank you. So I'm going to pass this on to Cassandra. One thing I wanted to add is just looking at the top table there. So our fee setting budget last year was roughly 34.9 million. In the May revise, the water rights fund expenditures are 38.8 million. So this is a net difference of about 3.9 million. So we're going to be trying to drive to a fee structure that's going to generate $3.9 million. Now that's 11.2% change in the fund. And so we'll have a little further discussions on that. But Cassandra will go over what's driving these costs.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. So our first table, like David mentioned, a recap of fiscal year 23-24 fee setting budget of 34.9 million, followed by the governor's May revised fee setting budget for fiscal year 24-25 is 38.8 million, a net difference of 3.9 million or 11.2%. And the second table shows the driving costs, which reflect increases due to the May revise. The first item is state operation. It had an increase of 840,000 or 2.4%. And that is primary employee compensation, salaries, healthcare, retirement. Next item is pro rata. There was a decrease of $2,000, which is less than 0% or a non-measurable percent change. The next item is California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. This is allotment for expenditures incurred for processing the Water Rights Fund annual invoices and collection activities. There was an increase of $7,000, which is again less than 0% or a non-measurable percent change. And then the next item are BCPs. And the first 3 BCPs were initiated during the Jan 10 budget. So the first one is the establishment and implementation of in-stream flow objectives in the Scott and Shasta River watershed. The amount is $711,000 or 2%. The second one is information security, privacy, staffing. The amount is $39,000 or 0.1%. The third one is the new groundwater recharge permitting unit, BCP, and it's about 1.2 million and 3.5%. And the final BCP added as of the May revise is the administrative hearings office special project, and it's 1.1 million or 3.2%. And I just wanted to note that out of the 11.2% overall increase, 8.8% is due to BCPs. And now I'll just go into a little more detail about the BCPs. So back to the first one, the establishment and implementation of in-stream flow objectives in Scott and Shasta River watersheds. The BCP will support establishing and implementing long-term in-stream flow objectives in the Scott River and Shasta River watershed. And the funding of $711,000 is ongoing for funding of 2 PYs. The second BCP, the Information Security and Privacy Office staffing. This BCP is to enhance information security. It will provide staffing needs in the areas of privacy, technical security, and informational security compliance. As I mentioned this morning, you may have heard the total amount of the BCP is $629,000, but the water rights share of that is $39,000. The third BCP, the new groundwater recharge permitting staff. This will support review of recharge applications, implement new recharge reporting requirements, establish in the Public Resources Code, coordinate with applicants and the Department of Water Resources on future recharge projects, help address water rights permitting backlog, and support hearings for protest resolution. And the funding of 1.2 million is ongoing for support of 5 PYs, 4 which will be in water rights and 1 PY in the Office of Admin hearing. And the final BCP, again, new as of the May revise, the Administrative Hearings Office Special Projects Package. This is to support expedite adjunctive hearings for significant water storage and conveyance projects. The proposed positions will preside over and support adjunctive hearings and pre-hearing conferences, provide technical analysis review, and respond to public comments, participate in board meetings and briefings, draft recommended orders and decisions, and present recommended orders to the board. The 1.1 million is ongoing funding for 4 permanent PYs. And David, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and at this point, we'll pause and we'll take a couple of questions here. Bob Gore, you have your hand raised.
Yes, about the groundwater recharge permit, BCP. The broader picture is we still continue to contend that's a statewide benefit and is improper use of fees, but that's a decision that's been made. It's a perfect case, though, for metrics. If we're going to pay the money, we'd like to know how many permits, how have they been accelerated on a year-to-year basis. It would be good to realize the benefits. And I may have some comments on AHO, but I'll defer to Steve at this point.
Steve, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, this is my ignorance of some of this, the language that's being used, but there was a reference to several of these BCPs as ongoing funding. Does that mean state general fund was appropriated at that level ongoing, or that position is ongoing?
So we mean ongoing, it's gonna be permanent basically. Um, so if it's for 5 positions, then it's ongoing funding for 5 positions, unless of course it's evaluated down the line where the positions are no longer needed.
So it's 5 ongoing positions, and then the breakdown of the fundings. Is this all falling back? Is the funding for these 4 items, these 4 BCPs, falling all back on the permit and license holders? Or is any of that supported through state general fund?
Well, no, all of these proposals are all supported by Water Rights Fund. So none of this is general fund.
Okay, let me look back at my sheet here the sheet real quick, just so I can make sure I've got this right. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay,
and
yeah, thank you for the clarification there.
And I believe Cassandra, right? There's a link on the agenda that takes you to the Department of Finance, or all these proposals are hyperlinked. So there's an opportunity to kind of read more detail, but there's also it talks about the funding, what fund that these proposals hit.
Correct.
I would say the one other question I have relative to these is there's my understanding there's a state hiring freeze. How do these positions fit in with the hiring freeze? Or because these are in the BCPs, is there an exception for those?
So yes, there is a well, John, if you want to go ahead and take this one, I can add afterwards, John.
Yeah, so right now there is no hiring freeze. There will be a vacancy sweep coming up, but we really don't know what the vacancy sweep means. I'll talk a little bit more about that just before the open discussion. But right now we've been told to hire BCP positions as a priority.
Got it. Thank you. And Bob's comments about a little better metrics and that in support of these would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So let me just check, are there any questions online? No online questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which is some fee change proposals that staff like to discuss. And before we get into the first one here, which has to do with application fees, before we get into that, not on the agenda, but a discussion that we've been having with Eric Eckall. One of the proposals is to adjust the base fee on permits and license annual fees. Currently, it's $300. The fee for the permits and licenses $300 plus 0.109 per each acre foot greater than 10 acre feet. And so last time the base fee was adjusted was in fiscal year 1920. So it's been 5 years. So if you're less than 10 acre feet, you haven't seen a fee increase or fee adjustment again in the last 5 years. So part of our proposal, and I just kind of wanted to verbally mention it, is that we are considering adjusting that base fee from $300 to $350. And we project that would generate anywhere from 500 to 600,000 of additional fee revenue. So when we start looking at the budget cost drivers and looking at the fund expenditures have gone up, budgetary expenditures have gone up by about 3.9 million. This is, of course, one option that's going to generate additional revenue. It's going to go towards supporting that. And now we have 4 other proposals, and each of these proposals also, well, not all of them, but there's a potential, of course, to generate additional revenue with these proposals. So I will move it to Shelby and Amanda, if I'm correct here, on our application fee proposal.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm Amanda Montgomery, the Permitting Program Manager in Division of Water Rights. And with me today is Shelby Witherby, who's an engineer in the permitting section. And she's our lead on the fee change proposed for applications. And I'll hand it over to Shelby in a minute, but I'm going to give some opening remarks. So this is our first meeting with you where we're rolling out this proposal. We're happy to answer any questions you have today and receive your feedback, or you can always email the fees email with your questions or input on the proposal as we're moving forward. So this is a comprehensive update to the application filing fees and some associated fees. Many of these fees have not been significantly updated since they were established in 2003 with establishment of the Water Right Fund. So these fees have been overdue for a revamp, and that's what we're proposing today. The fee structure can be fairly complicated for our applicants and also for our staff. So one of the key features of the proposal is to simplify the fee structure by moving from an acre-foot approach to a tier approach that you'll see in the proposal. This keeps the same underlying approach of higher fees for larger filings, since the larger the project, the more work that's generally involved. We are honing fees, though, in areas where, with our history, we've seen that the projects are more complicated. Our proposal has in 2 of these special surcharges, one for applications in the Bay Delta watershed, which we know is of high complexity for many factors, including consideration of the projects and just the complexity of the watershed and the number of parties there. And also projects that involve on-stream dams in the North Coast in-stream flow policy area. These tend to be small dams, small on-stream dams, but they're highly complex as far as how we have to process them through the North Coast in-stream flow policy. So one thing you'll see in our proposal is that we have an increase in fees for all applications, but that includes applications to acquire temporary permits for recharge. Staff has been really focusing on these types of temporary permits over the last 10 years. And now around a third of permitting staff are currently focused on these temporary permit filings in any given year, which is much more than I really expected back. Bob knows we did a BCP in 2016, and I knew Sigma was coming then, but I really did not know the extent of how much work it would be and how invested we would be. And it's really an area of success for us. We're able to see a lot of success in getting these permits out quickly. We did, as a board, lower the fees for these back in 2015, and we bumped them up a bit in 2018, but they still remain much lower than they would have been if we would have kept them in line with other temporary permits of other types, like not for recharge, like if you needed it for direct diversion or for above ground storage. So right now, these temporary permits, so we use, even for our standard temporary permits today, we tie that to the standard application fee. And those are about 50% of the standard application fee right now. And these temporary permits for recharge are paying more like 2 to 4% of the standard application fee. So you can see they're much, much lower, but they're taking a lot of our staffing. So, and you also heard about the BCP. So we want to continue to incentivize these projects, but we also need to bump up the fees to better cover our current level of staffing on these projects. And also, if the BCP does move forward it will also increase the staffing on these projects and the fees that we would like to see covered. So one thing that we are doing, because we want to see continued growth in filing of temporary permits for recharge, is we've done a lot of thinking about how to incentivize these and have lower fees in certain circumstances that we think will benefit our applicants and benefit us on our side of the board for having being able to better process the projects. So there's 3 major incentives, and Shelby will also go through these, but I'll highlight them here. So the first is if the application for the temporary permit is received at least 120 days in advance of the requested diversion season. So this helps the party by having that approval in hand, that permit in hand, before the diversion season starts, so they don't miss diversion opportunities. And one thing that we saw this last year was that parties were applying too late and they were getting it midway through the season. And when we look back at the data, they could have diverted more if they would have had the permit in hand. So we're planning to give them a discount on their filing fee if they file at least 120 days in advance. Another is if the party pursues the 5-year temporary permit instead of repeating 5 times the 180-day. So that also, in the same way, helps them because they will have that approval in hand each year. They don't have to come back year after year. It's also much more efficient for us in that we don't have to process the permit each year. We can process it once and we have more time to spend on other projects because we have a lot of projects that need our attention. So the way we're incentivizing that is pretty significant. It's basically, if they apply for the 5-year, it costs the same as 180-day permit. So it's like 4 years for free. So we're really hoping that parties will move into the 5-year pathway. Another thing that's a benefit of the 5-year is they can use the data that they collect to help them move through protests on their standard application. And these recharge projects are filed by SGMA parties that are generally needing this water permanently. So they should be pursuing standard applications. So it'll help the whole permitting process be more effective. Our final area of discount is we have a current discount on standard applications that we've had in place since about 2019, where we have a streamlined pathway for processing recharge projects. If they're focusing on the highest flow, so flood flow, high flows in the water bodies, because those flows are the lowest. They're the easiest for us to permit. They're the lowest risk of injury to in-stream resources and senior diverters. So we've had that on standard apps. We're going to extend that discount of 25% to these 2 temporary permit types, the 180-day and the 5-year. So that's also another powerful incentive. And I think about half of our 180-day temporary permits last year were using the streamlined pathway. So a lot of parties will probably qualify for that discount. So you may wonder about permit applications and how much of the program staff we're going to cover with these new fees. So one thing about permit applications is we don't control what comes into us. It's highly variable. We have years of large application filings and years of a lot of small application filings. So the revenue is highly variable. Our goal here isn't to get to 100% coverage of application fees covering the program staff, but rather to bump up the fees and bring us more in line with modern workload. We do plan to have the fee tiers because we'll have these 13 tiers if it moves forward to bump up slightly, such as by a factor that's worked out with administrative services staff, such as the CPI each year, so that the fees aren't just kind of caught in amber and not going up each year. And we'll also revisit the fees overall should they go into place periodically and adjust as needed. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Shelby to walk through the table.
Thanks, Amanda. Here we see that our first fee is the standard application filing fee. This currently is a base fee of $1,000 plus $15 per acre foot, greater than 10 acre feet, capping out at $648,914. We are proposing to change it to the following tiered system, if we could scroll down, which is significantly more straightforward. There will be a new project complexity surcharge of 20% for applications in the Delta watershed and applications containing on-stream dams in areas pertinent to the North Coast in-stream flow policy. These surcharges also apply to other types of application filings, like temporary permits that I'll discuss next. For standard applications, we will continue our current discount of 25% for standard applications for recharge using the board's streamlined approach. There is also a new footnote which requires the payment of an additional standard application filing fee for applications for more than 40,000 acre-feet at the price cap when an application splits into multiple projects. The 13 tiers are shown below in red. If we could continue on, we see. Great, thank you. We see that the proposed fees range from $5,000 to $811,143. If you compare it to current fees, the fees for a project asking for 40,000 acre-feet, for example, is actually staying the same. However, for fees for smaller projects, they are increasing to better reflect that regulatory requirements on small projects are still intensive. I also point out Tier 13, which is proposing a higher fee for the largest projects of over 200,000 acre-feet. Great, thank you. Applications for small hydroelectric. So then moving on to our next category. Great. Applications for small hydroelectric currently are $1,000. Yes, I note that we very rarely receive these types of filings. For projects under 10 acre-feet, we are proposing to set this equal to Tier 1 of the standard application fee, including the complexity surcharge. For projects 10 acre-feet or greater, we are proposing to set it to Tier 2. And an example is shown here to the right. We see that the proposed fees range from $5,000 to $40,000. Moving on, we have application fees for 180-day temporary permits other than for diversion to underground storage, which is currently structured as the greater of $2,000 or 50% of the standard application fee. We are proposing to keep this fee approach basically the same, except we are simplifying to just 50% of the standard application for ease. Next, applications for 180-day permits for small hydroelectric are currently $1,000. For projects under 10 acre-feet, we are proposing to set this equal to 50% of the Tier 1 standard application fee, including the complexity surcharge. For projects 10 acre-feet or greater, we are proposing to set it equal to 50% of Tier 2. And then if we could scroll down just a bit, we have an example shown to the right. And with this, we see that the proposed fees range from $2,500 to $20,000. Moving on, we have 180-day temporary permits to divert to underground storage during high flow events. Currently, the fee is fairly complicated as the lesser of the non-recharge temporary permit application fee, which has a greater than comparison baked in, or $5,000 plus an acre-foot charge. We are proposing to increase revenue and simplify this fee by moving back to the approach used for other 180-day temporary permits of 50% of the standard application fee. However, we'd reduce the fee down to 35% if submitted 120 days in advance of the proposed diversion season. We also propose to provide a 25% discount if the application will rely on the board's streamlined application approach. The same discount we already provide for standard applications, we make available for temporary permits. Next, we have renewals of 180-day temporary permits for underground storage, which currently are $1,500 plus an acre-foot charge. We have been processing a number of renewals and found that these generally are the same amount of work as initial recharge filings, as the procedural steps are the same and new objections can arise with each filing. Thus, we are proposing to eliminate this category and have renewals pay the same as an initial application. This approach will treat recharge the same as other 180-day temporary permit applications, where initial and renewals paid the same fee. Moving on, we have applications for 5-year temporary permits. And these currently pay this equivalent of 5 seasons of a 180-day recharge application. It's a fairly complex fee of $6,000 plus the lesser of the standard 180-day temporary permit fee, or $5,000 plus $10 for every acre-foot sought by the application. Additionally, there is an annual component of 20 cents for every acre-foot diverted. We are here proposing to highly incentivize this option by matching the same fee as the 180-day recharge applications. An example is shown which compares the fees under the current structure and proposed structure for 3 different volumes. Great. Taking a look at a scenario for 10,000 acre-feet, we see that under the current fees for a 5-year application, this would cost $20,000. The proposed 5-year application fee would be raised to $66,500. While this fee is higher than the current, it is still much smaller than what a party would pay currently for a single season of a non-recharge 180-day permit. Coming back to the example, we show for a comparison what a party would pay to acquire 5 180-day temporary permits, which would be $332,000, making the 5-year temporary permit a good option for those trying to reduce their costs. As with the 180-day, we are proposing a new option of 25% discount for streamlined recharge applications. Next, we have change petitions involving a split, and these are currently $850. Earlier, I mentioned splits of larger applications of 40,000 acre-feet. Here, the split fee is specifically for changes in ownership, but we also sometimes receive requests for splits for other reasons. For this split fee, the $850 fee will stay the same. However, if the filing is for more than 40,000 acre-feet or more, the party will pay an amount equal to the additional standard application fee that would have been due for having a separate project if filed separately. Petitions to revise declarations of fully appropriate stream systems, which are filed when a party wants to pursue an application but must overcome the board's findings that no water remains to be appropriated, are proposed to increase from $10,000 to $100,000. These types of petitions require a hearing and are very complex and time-intensive. Next, we have petitions for assignment of a state-filed application filed with water rate application are another type of action that requires a water rate hearing. For this, we are proposing to increase these from $5,000 to $20,000. And finally, we have requests for a release from priority of a state-filed application, which currently are $5,000. We're proposing to update this to $20,000 for unnoticed or protest applications, $5,000 for pending applications that have been noticed with no unresolved protests, and $10,000 for a pending application that has been noticed with no unresolved protests and simultaneously seeks release from 2 or more state-filed applications. And that takes us to the end of all of our fee categories, and we are open for questions. It looks like we have one from Steve.
Yeah, it's maybe more of a broad comment than a specific, and then we'll probably have some specific questions coming via email at some point. But I know you've used the term in a number of cases to incentivize some of these temporary permits. As a fee payer for water rights licenses, I see that as we're subsidizing those applications. And in many cases, those are adversarial or create operational issues in the area. that are unresolved. So I have a lot of heartburn over that, not charging them the full cost of processing and being subsidized by other water rights fees. So I want to put that out there. And I've noted that in many meetings before. So
Yeah, and
I do have a concern with that.
this is Amanda. I definitely, I hear you. And we'll take that comment into consideration. I would note that the incentives, like an incentive to file 120 days early and an incentive to use the streamlined pathway, those we're pointing out how those help the parties that are applying, but they also help us in the processing. So it's not a from the applicant, maybe not from the existing right holder point of view, but from an applicant point of view, it's kind of win-win for them and for us. So I just point that out.
And if it truly is a cost savings, I'm all for that. But if it's not covering the full cost of processing that, I have a lot of heartburn with that piece. So
right, I hear you. And one thing that you do see in our proposal is moving forward a proposal to really bring up the fees on the temporary permits to better reflect the staffing that we're investing into them.
And I do appreciate that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Are there any more questions for this proposal?
I don't see any at this time. Again, I just want to remind everyone that you can always submit comments again to the water rights fee email after this meeting, and which will help with further discussion. All right. Well, thank you, Amanda and Shelby. Appreciate it. We will go ahead and move on to the next item, next proposal, which is the late reporting fee. I'll go ahead and tee this off. The water rights holders and claimants are required to submit diversion and use data to the Division of Water Rights each year. The board and other agencies like the Department of Water Resources, Fish and Wildlife, local water managers rely on this data for regulatory compliance, resource management, and water allocation decisions. The data is also a key component of the curtailment and drought decisions. Unfortunately, compliance with existing reporting requirements is very low. As of April of 2024, there's roughly around 13,000 diverters out of 41,000 that have not reported. Many of these diverters are less than 10 acre feet per year. These small diverters have not been subject to robust enforcement actions due to considerable staff resources needed for such large undertaking. However, there's also, substantial non-compliance with large diverters. Roughly 500 non-filers for diverters that report between 1,000 and 10,000. There's 70 non-filers for diverters that report between 10,000 and 100,000 acre feet per year. And there's approximately 21 non-filers for diverters that report more than 100,000 acre feet per year. So we are, the Water Board staff is proposing establish a late fee. And the fee would be based on one type of water right, no fee for the pre-14 and repairing diverters, 2, the size of the water right, and 3, how late the reported data is submitted. We believe that the late fee would have multiple benefits. One, reduce staff workload related to obtaining diversion data, incentivizes timely reporting, and minimizes future annual fee increases through the avoidable source of revenue. So as you look at this table here, it's basically just kind of going through. You have size of acre feet, and then we have a percentage basically on depending on how late your fee may be. So just as an example, at a base $300 fee, if you're, anywhere between 30 and 60 days, 25% of that. So you'd be subject to a fee of around $75. Anything greater than 90 days is about 150. So you would range anywhere from $75 to $150 there. And as you scroll down, the larger size, of course, we've increased the percentages, so there'd be fees would be greater for those that have larger acre feet per year. Eric, if there's something you want to touch on with this proposal?
I think that was a great overview. You did hit the pertinent points that we do incur, especially, taking the last couple of years of drought into account, a lot of additional staff time to go back and try and get this information. And this is in part a way to help kind of recover those costs and reflect the actual workload that's going into it. We based the percentages to a degree. It's not quite apples to apples, but looking at what other state agencies charge in terms of late fees, I think the one that probably people are most familiar with is like the DMV, where if you're late in turning in your car registration, you pay an additional fee and it kind of bumps up and it bumps up. And I think it does cap out at about 85% of the total registration fee. Although I might go back and relook at that. It might actually be higher than that. But we think it's reasonable. We do think it will help offset future fee increases for other fee payers, just because we'll be able to generate some amount of income. If we just take a rough back of the envelope calculation, we still have about, as David said, 13,000 folks that haven't reported this year. If you take about a 50-50 split in terms of riparian pre-14 versus post-14, we only have the fee authority for doing late fees for the post-14 appropriative rights. The actual breakdown is probably 45-55, but for sake of math, let's just assume 50-50. That's still about 5,000-ish plus, maybe even 6,000 plus parties that haven't submitted on time and would be subject to this late fee. Just again, rough back of the envelope calculation, I think this year we would have generated over $1 million from it. We can't guarantee that every year. I would hope that over time, actually, the amount we generate would go down because people would start reporting on time and actually substantially comply, but it would help offset the workload that goes into it. It is a new approach, and it would be a little bit different than what we've done before, but again, the rate of compliance, especially in that kind of 0 to 100 category, but also maybe up to 1,000, is pretty poor. And I think of the 13,000 or so that still haven't reported, about 10,000 to 11,000 are less than 100 acre feet. Any questions on this part?
Not seeing any. Steve, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, it looks like this is, yet to have the complete regulation put together, but I'd assume there'd be some kind of a notice or something in the event it was a general an honest mistake of like not getting the final submit button on filing your reporting or something like that. Because I'd sure hate to. I know in our case we make every effort to get everything in on time, but there's also a lot involved with getting multiple licenses submitted and that. And if it's simply a matter of missing to hit the submit button after doing all the work, I'd hate to get a $60,000 or $70,000 bill because we didn't hit the submit button. So just some kind of basic noticing or some kind of whatever the right language is, due process or whatever. I would encourage to make sure that's embedded in the process.
Absolutely. And I think, that's why we don't even propose a late fee until after 30 days. And if you tie that together with the new data system that should hopefully be coming online in the next year or so, we'll have a much easier way to notify fee payers if they're late, if we haven't gotten their report. It really will be email driven and much more easily
Okay.
communicated just through electronic means. And February 2nd comes along, we can email blast out everyone who hasn't submitted yet. And that should hopefully address a lot of those issues that you just raised. But absolutely, we need to have all of the kind of proper regulatory channels and structure to it so that there is a due process to it. There's a pathway for essentially a petition for reconsideration. Although that might not be the quite correct legal
Yeah.
framing of it. But yes, point very well taken.
And I do appreciate the effort at this, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Doesn't look like we have any other questions at this time, so we'll move on to the next proposal, which is the registration program fees.
Okay, I'll just kind of walk you through those. So the first item is the registration amendment filing fee. And it's been revised to remove and add language to make consistent with the original registration fee. Because Water Code Section 1228.7 doesn't mention anything about a petition, the process for making a change is to submit an amended registration. And also the fee for a new registration for small domestic and livestock stock pond use is $250. So in order to align the two, the amendment fee is lowered, so not to cost more than the original registration fee. And the second item is for small irrigation appropriation registration fee. And this is adding clarifying language to address a current situation. So at times, a registrant who stops using the registration for cannabis cultivation may request to revoke their cannabis small irrigation use registration, or CSIR, and replace it with the non-cannabis registration. The enforcement staff will not finalize the CSIR revocation until the new registration is approved to cover the existing water diversion. Depending on the processing time and the new registration, the registrant may end up paying the annual fee of $750 for the unused CSIR while waiting for the approval of the replacement registration. And the additional language is proposed to address this situation. I'll hand it back to you, David.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding that? Okay. Again, more kind of cleanup language at this point that we're proposing. And then the final item there, which is the water rights, water quality certification fees. Again, just some clarifying language. We don't, of course, have the water, the structure, excuse me, the strikeout version or anything like that. But we wanted to state that this proposal is just to simplify the water right related water quality certification fees. We're either going to remove or modify subdivision B2 from the California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 3833. By doing this, this will simplify the application fee structure such that the applicants could more easily predict applicable fees using either Section 3833.1 or Section 2200, depending on the type of certification sought. This change would not be expected to significantly change fees for any type of certification application, but may reduce the overall division's cost of processing certifications slightly. So I'm not seeing any comments or questions. So again, that lays out at this point staff's fee proposals. As we move into the August 1st, we'll have, we're also, based on comments, potentially making adjustments but we'll also be presenting these proposals at our August first stakeholder meeting. So next item on the agenda, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and it was referenced, of course, from Eric also, is that this is the form that we discuss these fees for. One, that that the legislation has authorized that the fee revenue go into the water rights fund. Of course, we track it separately, but this is, of course, the form for us to discuss that. There were a couple of PowerPoint slides that we were going to pull up here. And they basically highlight the process over the last few months. So just give us a sec, we'll pull those up. Here we go. So Sigma fee updates on March 19th. The board adopted a resolution to revise fees associated with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. The adopted fee schedule reduced the volumetric component of the annual fee from $40 per acre foot extracted to $20 per acre foot. No other changes were proposed or adopted for any other element of the Sigma extraction reporting fees. Next slide. And as the Sigma implementation continues, board staff will continue to consider how fees may affect domestic users, small farmers, and other classes of pumpers, and alternative collection methods such as potential for GSAs collecting board imposing extraction fees. So as the program continues to mature, and the potential more additional basins coming on probation, we'll continue to monitor the revenue and, of course, compare that with our staff expenditures and the appropriated budgetary expenditures that was authorized for this program. I see no questions at this time. I was going to ask John Russell if he wanted to add anything at this time. John may not be on the call right now.
Yeah, I'm on. Thanks, David. Yeah, I did want to add a couple things, and we talked a little bit about it this morning in the water quality fee meeting. But what you've heard so far in this meeting is what we know so far in how to build the budget and how to build the fees based on the budget that we have right now. There are a couple of proposals in the works that will affect our fees, and one of them is that the administration is proposing to do a vacancy sweep. You've probably read in the newspaper that the governor wants to eliminate 10,000 vacancies overall statewide. We don't know what our share of that is yet. We don't know how those are going to be apportioned for sweeping. We don't know anything about that, basically. The other proposal is about an 8 or 9% cut. I think it's about an 8% cut. For that proposed cut, we don't know if it's strictly related to general fund or if it'll be across all funds or what. So once we do get more information on that, and we've been told by the Department of Finance that we can expect more information in the fall. We don't know exactly what the timing of fall means. We're hoping it's earlier rather than later. But as we get that information, we'll go back and sharpen our pencils a little bit and see how those are going to impact our fees. If anything, the good news for all of you, though, is the impacts, they are cuts to our overall budget. So it should, in theory, make fees go down. Like I said this morning, that's sort of a long-winded way of saying we don't know what we don't know right now. All we have is the conceptual plan from the administration. And once we do get additional information, we'll go through and see how it affects fees. And like I said a minute ago, we're hoping we get that information so that we can present it to you in our August stakeholder meeting. I have a hunch, though, that we won't get it that early, and I hope we get it before our September fee setting board meeting, but I'm not even sure we'll get it in time for then. So things are in flux. We'll do our best to keep all of you updated. We may have to have another sort of ad hoc fee stakeholder meeting once we do get that information and we're able to figure out what it means in terms of the fees.
And just to add to what John just said, we'll have to evaluate it. So there's a potential, I just want to add this, there's a potential fees may go down, and or the other option, of course, is that we keep fees at its current level, right? Or whatever the adopted level is. And although this proposal is coming in for 24-25, we may not really see the full impacts until 25-26. So I do want to bring that up also. So there is a I won't say there's not the potential of lowering fees, but there's kind of this range of lowering the fees to potentially keeping the fees maintained where they're at. Again, based on what the direction we get from the Department of Finance of where these kind of reductions and what funds are affected by them. So I think Steve had his hand up first.
The simple question was just how might this impact timing of the sending out of bills? Typically, you've been sending out invoices in the November timeframe. If you don't have that information in hand, will you still target that November timeframe, or would you hold off on invoicing?
Yeah, that's something we're going to have to talk about once this information comes in, because there is a very real need for us to collect fees just to keep our day-to-day operations going. So depending on how late it is, if it comes in early enough, we'll probably make the revisions needed, if any, and then keep to the current fee schedule. Or we may have to, like David said, just say, okay, it's come in too late in the year. We can't really accommodate them this year, but next year we'll be able to, you'll get like a double discount type of thing if it results in a discount. So
Great, thank you.
The short answer is, again, we just don't know.
I guess what I heard is likely on the same time schedule.
Yeah, that's what we're planning for right now. Everything, like I said before, that you've heard so far, we've built the fees off of what we currently know about the budget. And there are these two big changes coming, and we don't even have enough information to be able to incorporate those into our discussions yet.
Thank you.
Chuck, you have your hand up. You're on mute, Chuck.
Yeah, first I want to apologize for missing the first half of this meeting. I am having continuing computer problems. So I am, how soon is the recording going to be available so I can kind of play catch up after the fact? Can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah, let me just verify with staff here. So
It'll be available within a week.
Yeah.
a week. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay, that'd be great. And I'll probably want to swing back and talk to you folks again after I take it and look at it. And I've one of the notes I've taken today. With respect to the vacancy sweep, you said 10,000 statewide employees. How many statewide employees are that at? Is that like a 1% or is it 10%?
I don't know the total number. I think it's around 250,000. My understanding is that 10,000 is about 3%.
Yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like a lot, but if you look, at the size of the government, it's not a whole lot.
Yeah, I get it. And going back to the item before on Sigma, it sounds like there's not going to be any changes this year in Sigma. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Going into this course fee structure, we have no proposals.
Okay.
And as you may be aware of, Chuck, we adjusted those a few months ago, so they were adjusted
Right.
from 40 down to 20.
Good. Okay, that's all I have. I'll probably be reaching out again in the next week or so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll just, we're kind of in this open discussion period right now. I'll just kind of leave it open if anyone else has any questions, comments. I see Bob Gore has his hand up. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. Bit of a question. What is the overall water rights permit fee increase proposed? What percentage is it? I just want to make sure I understand.
So, Bob, kind of at my beginning discussion. So the budgetary costs have gone up by $3.9 million. So that's about 11.8%. Now, what we're trying to figure out within the organization and working with the division is that, one, of course, if we raise the base fee on the permits and applications, that's going to raise X amount of dollars. We also have some adjustments, of course, with the application fees and potentially with the late reporting fees.
Right.
So we're projecting that that's going to also generate additional revenue. We just don't have those numbers just yet. We're hoping I'll have them for the August meeting. And so we have additional revenue in these areas. And then kind of once we figure that out, we're going to need to kind of look at what area that will adjust the fees, which is usually the per acre foot charge, right? And so
Right.
what that percentage is going to look like. Don't have that number right now just because of kind of figuring out of these new proposals that will, generate additional revenue into the program. How much that's going to offset, and then go forward on figuring out what that per acre foot charge will be increased or adjusted to.
You don't have a range or an anticipated. I mean, right now we're at $1.09, correct?
No. Oh, no. It's less than a penny, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Right.
109, right? So
Yeah,
it's less
sorry.
than a cent. I mean, I don't have the exact percentage, but for example, Eric mentioned that on the late reporting fee side of things, there could be $1 million there potentially come in. We could generate another 500,000 to 600,000 on that, just raising the base fee. So you're getting close to the 3.9, at least half of it almost. And so and then application fees, of course, it's going to vary. I think one proposal I was meeting with staffing on, it was close to maybe $500,000 could be a potential proposal. So just those three. Again, you're more than 50% of the 3.9. And so then instead of 11.8, maybe it's roughly about a 5% per acre foot charging adjustment.
There you go. Thanks.
But again, at the August meeting, we'll have a little more concrete information.
And that was a gross estimate. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Chuck, you have your hand raised. And Chuck, why don't you can you want to identify yourself or who you represent?
Yeah, sorry about
everyone
that.
knows.
I meant to do that. Chuck White. Actually, I was working for Manette Phelps and Phillips as a direct employee until recently, and now I'm being a consultant to Manette Phelps and Phillips. And one of my assignments is going to be keeping track of the fees for the Imperial Irrigation District, which is the reason I'm on. And I did have a quick question, if I can remember what it was. There's been a couple of times, both this morning's meeting and this meeting, when someone, and I can't remember the gentleman's name on this meeting, but talked about how you have a tendency to spread fee increases out over the broadest number of people you can justify. And I was wondering if you could provide a position paper on that, maybe not even for this fee, but exercise, but maybe for the one a year from now, is what kind of baseline rationale is there for making a decision whether a particular fee is specific to one particular watershed or one particular area of the state, and more of a rationale about why you'd want to spread that cost over the entire state. I guess you can make the argument, which I think you did this morning, is that, well, everybody's in line to get covered by one of these maybe enforcement actions or actions that it's just a matter of time. So that's why you justify it, spreading it over. But I'm not sure that really there's anything to back that up. So I'm just curious if it could be some topic for maybe more extended discussion as we move forward.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And it's not related to geographic area per se. It's really related to the program. And
Right.
in the topics this morning, those two BCPs were related to our foundational programs, and those foundational programs are spread across all fee-paying programs for the most part.
Yeah, and I maybe I'm the only one, but I don't have a clear understanding about what things can move into foundational and move out, or not move at all. And
Yeah, we can.
Some little understanding about this whole issue of, I mean, I think most people, most fee payers would be more willing to pay the fees that they know they're directly responsible for their own activities. But when you start getting further afield, I think it does raise the hackles of folks a bit, and it would be nice to have a clear understanding of how that works. And I'm not talking about a 100-page treatise on it, but something that would give some people a sense there's a rationale. Is there a break point where the amount is small enough, or the amount is a discharger or water rights holder specific, and maybe that's how you should look at it? Or is there problems in doing that? Are you limited to having fees charged on more of a specific entity, like the Gualala thing, for example? I guess the other one was a single watershed too, just from this morning.
Yeah, they're single watershed, but again, it's not really the way we look at it as on a single watershed. We're really looking at it as a programmatic. It's related to our TMDL program. So this is a little bit out of topic for the water rights, but we can certainly do that.
Yeah.
We can revisit what our foundational programs are, why they're in the foundational program category, what they need to be in there.
Yeah, I tried to do a little search on your website for foundational programs, and I couldn't find anything. Maybe
Yeah, we've prepared something in the past, so we can probably put that back out and revise it and send it back.
It'd be easier for me to turn around when I have to indicate what to folks I represent, what's going on, and I find myself kind of unable to clearly explain it. And a little bit of help here from you guys would be great.
Yeah, Chuck, there is a 1-page or maybe a 2-page document that talks about our direct, indirect, and foundational cost on our website. I'll go ahead and forward you that link after this meeting.
Yeah, it's fine. You can forward it on to me, and I'll be reaching out to you probably within a week or 10 days to follow up on my missing attendance on this afternoon's meeting.
Okay, sounds great.
Bad. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Steve, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, if you could forward that to probably everybody on this call, that would be great. Or attach it to the meeting packet.
Okay, we'll figure out the best appropriate way of doing that. It's, again, the foundational side is not related to water rights, it's water quality. So we'll go back to the water quality information.
Yeah, I don't think water rights fee payers even pay the foundational costs.
Okay, yeah, then I wouldn't worry about it, but I'm kind of looking at the BCPs, like the flow objectives. Is that something you consider more as a programmatic program within the state board or within the Division of Water Rights versus, something that could kind of describe those elements? If there's a similar kind of function, that would be helpful. A one-pager.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything equivalent to foundational programs in the water rights program.
Okay.
Just FYI, in the water quality program, the foundational programs are large scale planning functions like basin planning, TMDL planning, are large scale groundwater monitoring programs and surface water monitoring programs. They're large programs that don't generate a fee because there's no permits involved or anything. It's something that we have to do it, but it doesn't in itself generate any revenue.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood that piece from not participating in the water quality side.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time. Just want to remind everyone kind of our next steps. We'll have our next fee stakeholder meeting will be on August 1st. At that time, we'll have an opportunity to evaluate the governor's enacted budget and be able to, of course, prepare reports. And if there's any changes or adjustments, we'll go ahead and have that ready and have those discussions at our August 1st stakeholder meeting. We are driving to a board adoption date of, I believe it's September 18th, where we'll take an item to the board for the board to consider and potentially adopt fee structures for the water rights program. And then, of course, those, I think most of you guys are familiar, but then 10 days prior to that, the agenda for or the agenda language and item will be out for public review at that point. So with that said, I don't have anything additional. I want to again thank all the stakeholders who participated in this meeting. We appreciate you taking the time out. We appreciate your input and your feedback. Again, you can reach out to myself or Cassandra and or John at any time if you'd like to discuss further on the if you have any comments, of course, on any of the proposals or input, we're definitely looking for that. And you can send those to the email that's on the agenda. The agenda and handout is also posted on our fee webpage. And as staff mentioned earlier, in about a week, we'll have the audio also available, or audio video available for this meeting. So again, with that said, appreciate everyone's time, appreciate program staff involved with everything they do in the program. And thank the fee staff behind the scenes for putting everything together for us today. With that said, we can go ahead and sign off, and everyone have a great rest of their day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.